Thank you so much for joining me. Until now, we've been talking about how branding and communications can improve company culture in the post-COVID workplace. What kind of responsibilities fall onto leadership to access buy-in from their teams, and even explored the integration of AI and AI tools and their impacts. Today, I really want to dive into intrinsic motivation and really cultivating a culture of holistic buy-in and genuine desire for productivity. I have the great pleasure of having Malcolm Pease with me today, an entrepreneur, company acquirer, and president of Setsera Growth Partners, an independent holding company specializing in buying blue-collar and industrial-type businesses in Texas. Welcome, Malcolm.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I love the intro. I'm honored.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. When you and I met, and I heard you speak recently at an M&A conference, I was really impressed with your no-nonsense approach to company culture in your acquisitions. So tell me a little bit about your philosophy of managing that and making sure your people feel ownership in their roles.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I don't remember everything verbatim I said, so I'll try my best to summarize it. But, candidly, I sit in a unique position. We buy blue collar industrial type businesses in Texas that are doing 3 to 12 million in revenue. And it's a very particular space. It's too small for most private equity groups, but it's right in that sweet spot where they've proven out market fit. They've been around for a long time, and it's ready to make that transition from a centralized business around the owner who was, candidly, the blood, sweat, and tears and energy that got the business to where it is. And then it's now into how do we get key people excited about where the business is going and build the systems and processes around that. So that's really that transition point. And so I really want to share that I have so much, respect and admiration for those that get a business to that size. But my specialty is actually taking the owner off the org chart, right? If you think about Apple, Tim Cook is not sitting in the middle, right? Like that has to change at some point. And we're at that cusp of when that takes place. And so when we sit down in the first couple of weeks and we present probably the first org chart they've ever seen, and I'm not on it, they're very confused immediately, right? And so they're like, wait a second, I'm used to you giving the answers, you giving the commands, and everybody has their cultural aspects to that, whether it be, they have a stand-up meeting every single week or micro meetings throughout the week, or they're walking around and handing out snacks in the middle of the day or whatever it might be. Everyone's got their unique flavor to that at that size where they are consistently in the middle. People are expecting you to bring the energy and the answers. And we really try to shift that culture.
So when you say you try to shift that culture, do you have like a get to know everyone kind of a thing before, you bring the org chart out, as it were?
Yeah, we definitely spend some time, obviously, interacting with folks, but I do not start with, let's sit down, you and I, for an hour and have a conversation about your family. I'd rather see how you work. Mm-hmm. So I'll come over to where you're working at and I'll spend some time with you and just chat with you and shake your hand some more and spend some time just kind of in your space, rather than let me bring you into my office and kick you out of your space and try to have this kind of conversation. Right. It doesn't feel like interrogating. And at the same while, I'm trying to get some kind of resolution from it. Let's just go to your world. Like, let's go spend some time. You spend in this station or this area, or you're kind of working on this one thing for the 8 hours of the day or whatever. And let me go spend some time with you. So sometimes it's, hey, let me help you lift that. And let's just chat, and so all that to be said, I try to bring myself to them rather than try to bring them in, because I think, again, I'm trying to go against that culture where it's, hey, come to the boss's office that's in the back corner and it's this mysterious black box of what he does all day. Like, no. Like, you have responsibilities. You have things you're required to do or things that you're accountable for. Let me go bring myself to your space. So that's how we do it, is really a very organic, spend some time in your space rather than come to my office.
So I love that you go into their space. I guess it's rare. I wouldn't say it's unique, but it's definitely rare. So when you're looking to acquire these companies, you gave me the revenue, but what is the company's size normally? How many people are we talking about?
Yeah. So, we have found, again, kind of variety. We're kind of at that 15 to 20 mark. We've seen it upwards of 30 as kind of the maxed out, maybe 40. I've never seen anything over 50, kind of in that space. that's just the structure that we've just kind of seen typically. When you start getting to 40 and 50, you have a little bit more established like team lead, supervisor stuff, all that kind of stuff. Versus before, it's like you have supervisors, but they don't really know what that title exactly means. And so that org chart conversation is already starting to establish that, right? Like, hey, hold on a second. In your signature on your email, you've got the following. I just want to be clear, like that's, if you want to keep that title, like that's what it means to me, right? Like I have no problem that you like that title and it makes you feel good and you get to tell your friends and you, what have you, like we'll do that. I had a supervisor the other day. I was walking in the office and I found some like makeshift laminated business cards of his. And I was like, where did these come from? Well, come to find out, like that's part of like what he wanted in his role, right? Like he wanted to have a business card that said supervisor. And that's really fun. I handed it to him and I said, hey man, I'll make you proper ones. Like you don't have to make this, like we can make one. So, but you know what's funny is it was a feedback loop for me too, right? Like, so I realized that I had kind of promoted him into a role where he was working with some vendors and they were coming on site and asking questions. And he wanted to be able to hand him a business card. Like that's the way he saw business done. I don't own any business cards. So for me, it was like, candidly, I didn't think through it, but I told him like, hey, you're right. Like you probably do hand out business cards more than I do at this point. So anyways, that's just a company culture thing, determining, where they sit in the org chart, but really what does it mean to them from a title perspective is that next level.
Yeah, that's so interesting. When I worked for a company in my 20s, I always told my superiors, I was like, I don't give a crap what you call me, just pay me for what I'm doing. I really don't care about my title. Yeah, it's interesting. But that, so I have a couple questions there. So the smaller company, when you're dealing with under 20 people, under 20 staff, your goal initially when you acquire these companies is to grow them. Is that accurate? Are you trying to like even hire more people? Are you trying to grow it inside and out, or just from a revenue standpoint or from a team standpoint? What is your objective there typically?
Yeah, great question. So we use a framework. We call it the top-down P&L approach. I probably stole it from somebody. If someone knows where it's from, please let me know, because I've read so many books now, I got lost where it was. But we use what I call the P&L top-down approach. It's probably called something else somewhere else. But anything that falls within the organization falls in three buckets. It falls in revenue driving circumstances, cost of goods, cost of labor circumstances, people tangibly doing the things, the materials you use, all that kind of stuff. And then all the rest is OpEx related stuff, whether it be, the building that you use on a regular basis, or your, insurance, or your back office aspects, all that kind of stuff, right? So there's three buckets. I always tell people that I want an upside down pyramid. I want the most people, if possible, at the top end. That's my goal. Is that I want people to be diversifying out on our revenue side of things, where we've got lots and lots of reach from a revenue, so our revenue stays more stable. Again, that's our circumstance right now, right? Where we buy these businesses, the revenue tends to be one person, maybe it's the owner, maybe it's somebody else, and all the relationship falls into them. That's not a really sustainable process when you're growing a business long term. That's why people build out, sales teams.
Right.
Like that's the whole thing. If you look as an enterprise situation and all these other corporate companies, like they are building out sales teams. Well, small businesses tend to not do that. What they tend to do, and I give them a lot of credit because it makes sense when the size that they're at, they have one person or two people at the top. They have a really fat middle, and then they have a really skinny bottom again, kind of one back office, administrative assistant, office manager that handles everything that's thrown at them. And they're like the real gas of everything that keeps it going. But then the middle is like all this cost of labor, people that actually fulfill things that are going on, which is great, but it's only so good is if the top actually works, right? If the top's not working, then the people below get affected. And if the people below are affected, then the bottom gets affected. So that's the structure we've used. It makes sense. I don't know where I got it from again, but I have always found in my position that I've got to take kind of more sophisticated business knowledge that I may have gotten from somewhere else and distill it down in such a way that the general people that we work with get to understand it and take action with it, right? So that's the way we look at it. I always want to be an upside down pyramid on the P&L top down approach.
Right. That's okay. And so when you first come in, I'm asking a lot of questions because I'm trying to get a feel for your process and your model. So when you first come in and you're not really meeting too many people. If it's under 20 anyway, that's pretty easy. So when you present this org chart, who are you presenting it to actually?
Yeah, whole team. So I go to Texas Roadhouse. We get steak. They do these little meals. They got like a steak, asparagus, and a salad and a mashed potato. We have a team lunch. We sit down and we start having the conversation. I tend to say, "Hey guys, we're going to do this more than one time. This is just the first of many. Sometimes it will be in 3 months. Sometimes it will be in 6 months. But I guarantee you, we'll do at least 2 of these a year."
Yeah.
The goal is in these conversations is to answer kind of any questions that you have and be able to be in a situation where y'all can feel like you can have access to ask these questions. And sometimes, the table is going to look very different. There's going to be times where there's going to be people here that have been here for a really long time. And then as a result, the company morphs and changes. But I promise you this, that my intent is to run this business for a very long time. So every decision is related to that. And you guys play a key component in that. But I will always make a decision on I'm going to run this business for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Mm-hmm. So as a result, here are the decisions I'm going to make.
Got it. And so what are you met with usually when that happens? What are there typical questions? Are there sort of questions you hear across the board, or is it different every time?
Yeah. Sure. So those that are out there that get to be in a unique situation of taking over a business or starting a business or whatever the case may be, when you're kind of in that leadership role, is you got to play a marathon. And so the reason we do after 2 weeks, one, it's for me to learn kind of some of the dynamics that are going on. And the second is it actually is 2 pay periods that clear.
Okay.
The conversation changes a lot when they've cleared their paychecks twice, right? And so they feel usually a lot better. Things are a little calmer. Things are settled in their world to some extent, but they still have a lot of questions, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. Their questions are, what's the impact? How many changes are coming? And so you usually get fielded with either all the changes they wanted to see or all the changes they anticipated, all that kind of stuff. And the goal is to field those questions and not give promises and just completely, repeat it over and over again. Hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Thanks for bringing that up to me. I recognize that's a challenge, or that machinery is actually more dysfunctional than I was told. All these type of things, right, come up very quickly. And but the big thing is let them see that we're playing a long game here. And I'm just learning right now. They have a ton more information. I always sit in the room. I had some impactful classes in grad school. One of them really helped me understand like interpersonal dynamics. Sure. And so I usually sit in the room and sit way back in my chair. I don't try to sit up in front and be aggressive posturally, like all those types of things. So the guys can say like, hey, this guy's just here to learn. Like he's less knowledgeable than me. And it gives them a bit of an edge, which they need, right? Like they need to walk out of that room. Not so much I'm going to go run through a brick wall for this guy, but hey, my job's secure and I'm confident in my skill so I can have a job, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I want them to walk away with more than anything else. So it's an awareness thing for them than it is for me to invoke some sort of future vision at that point.
Yeah, I really love that. I think the laid back approach is key here because it really gives people a sense of ease and offers them that ownership. We have the model that we use actually. And so, at Black Ribbit, we basically apply and implement a model that's designed to align the company with the customer value proposition back to the employee value proposition. Right. So we call it the inside outside in model because the entire point of it is to come in when there's sort of disarray in the company culture and within among employees and so on. But it's like, how do you identify who an ideal employee is for a certain company? It's actually it's not just about what the company does, but also who they're serving. Right. So like if I, as an employee, I'm okay with what we do, but I don't like the people we're serving, then there's already a disconnect there. And like the different people in different departments at different levels are not all the same, not to mention they have different lifestyles and so on. So we want to make sure that the company vision, aligns with the customer, with what the customer wants, that which aligns with what the employee wants. And so when you come into these organizations, how much, what's already in place? Like, this is what I'm very curious about. Like, what kind of policies are in place? Are you looking at that? And I'm not talking about from an operations standpoint or even like finance or legal. I'm talking from like a brand standpoint. And blue collar industry is interesting because it's very much about, it's very like task oriented. I know this, and it's very much operations based, but there is still, I always have this argument with like manufacturers, for example. They're like, we don't care about branding. Branding doesn't matter. That's all like this emotional stuff. And I'm like, well, you're getting emotional about it right now. So let's it's still, there's still buy-in from everybody. Like, somebody likes to work here. It's not always just about a paycheck. So when you come in to these organizations, are there policies surrounding employee engagement? Maybe, like, for lack of a better word, an employee handbook, and, what's what I'm looking for? Incentives, certain models or programs that are put in place to maintain employee engagement. Do those exist at all when you come into these companies?
There's no perfect answer to that. It's a variety of circumstance for sure, and you're always kind of catching somebody in different points. I think more pressingly that there's the kind of nuts and bolts aspects of company engagement and things that need to be in place. I'm more of a believer of there's kind of explicit company culture and kind of sub company culture that's taking place, and that's what I'm trying to understand. What's going on here? Who's the one that needs to be the alpha? Who's the one that feels like they need to make sure this is going on? And in some cases, it's the owner. Some cases, it's like a very low level employee. It just depends, right? I think human nature is fascinating, and I'm not. I have an undergrad in psychology and some grad school classes, but I'm not a psychologist by any means. But I think human nature is fascinating in the sense that if there's not a leader in place, the void will get filled by somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And it may be intentional by the owner. They hire somebody that's more of the leader, or sometimes it's somebody that they didn't anticipate and becomes the leader, because there is that structure that kind of takes place just culturally in a company. And so, anyways, all that to be said, it's interesting to see what void will take place when the owner is no longer involved. So, key thing that we do, we believe that the business got to the point that it is because the owner is there, positively or negatively, right? It's a matter of they are comfortable with where the business size is at. They're comfortable with the dynamics. They've built a nice business that takes care of their family, and they've now diversified into a bunch of real estate holdings because they spun off a bunch of cash for a few years. Like, all these things play into that culture that matters, right? So, like, there was an instance where I looked at a business and I was there, and the owner, I was supposed to be in due diligence with them there, and they left for like majority of the time that I was there. And so, all that to be said, like, that's part of the company culture. And then one of the guys says, he's the guy that's always gone, right? Like, and so that's part of the culture. And it may have not been that culture 5 years ago, but it's part of it now. Mm-hmm. So from a company structure perspective, there usually is, a handbook or some other kind of policies that are somewhat put in place. Typically, it's by the office manager who's a little bit more detail oriented versus the visionary kind of person at the CEO level. But I less worry about that because that stuff can be created. I'm more worried about what's the current culture structure like. What are the dynamics that are currently happening in the subculture aspects of this organization? And who are the people that, like, hey, if we are making this push, and I bring back to my point earlier, if we're going to make a push where it's going to be really sales driven for a period of time, as a result, like, who does this affect? Because that's what ends up happening. I use the plumber analogy. Most plumbers can't determine what the issue is unless they put water down it or air down it. That to me is sales. You push sales through the funnel process, you tend to find out where it breaks. And so that's what happens with us is some people, all of a sudden we push sales, we start driving some nice quarters, and all of a sudden, like, the guy shows up and he's like, hey, I'm overworked, or whatever it may be. And so that's the feel that I'm trying to figure out. Where is that going to break? And is that too big of a break when we're going through due diligence to determine that we're not going to go forward with this business?
Right. Okay. Again, that was awesome. There's a lot that I that I got from that
All
one.
right.
So
Long answers. I apologize.
No, it's okay. It's great. So then how? Okay. So I guess I have two questions there. If it's I really admire like your observational approach, like the fact that you basically sit back and let the cards sort of lie where they fall and just see what happens and then address it, as opposed to trying to force anything in any particular direction. At least that's what I'm gathering. And
yeah, so we're definitely clear on the fact that we are playing a long game, but we're going to play very tactfully in the sense that I'm going to go push sales. And most of the guys that are like the bulk of our business, because again, most businesses are more like a middle full versus a top or bottom. They have a lot of people in the cost of labor situation. And so as a result, they're going to be affected very quickly once sales starts happening. And so I tend to not even really address that. I just go with what we're doing. And then they kind of come to find out, hey, we're getting really busy. Well, this guy's a genius. Maybe he's really got something here. Right. But like the whole point of it is like, let's go push sales. And as a result, we'll kind of figure out what happens. And there's people that self-select out of that organization, right? Like that's the truth. And so, and that's different than what we're doing versus like the Elon Musk Twitter situation is what I always tell people to compare. Like he obviously let a bunch of people go. People obviously let themselves go for different reasons, but there was also a hiring period during that where people were joining the team, right? And so that tends to be what happens. Like after about 6 to 9, 12 months, like the team has kind of been cleaned a little bit in the sense of like, not so much I fire them. I don't think I've ever let somebody go. What ends up happening is we say, okay, we're going to go this direction. And they're like, no, I don't want to work that hard. Like I've literally been in situations where I try to communicate that and they're just like, I don't want to work that hard. I'm like, okay, great. Like there's other places. Like it's all good.
yeah,
that's part of it.
right.
So that's the way we think about it.
And you brought up another point I wanted to address. So how does that affect hiring at this point? So since you're growing or the team is coming in and out or growing overall, these, in your let's say profiling, when you're picking the ideal employees, are you putting formal sort of formal profiles or areas, whether it's characteristic or expertise or chemistry or otherwise, in place for different roles that you need to fill? Like when you start hiring people, how does the new process, the new policy, the new culture, as it were, affect the way that you onboard and even choose new recruits?
Yeah, great question. I'm going to say a hot take that maybe offends people. I believe business is the effort and energy to leverage an asset to produce a profit. So as a result, people in your organization that are part of your cost of labor, they're an asset to utilize. You can either have a CNC machine or you can have somebody grinding with their hands, right? Like it's an asset in my opinion. Like, and I don't mean to distill it down to that. And I would never talk to the guys that way or gals, for that matter. But I want to be clear. Like I have to figure out how do I utilize that. And so if I have one supervisor that oversees 5 people versus 10, the economics change. And so as a result, we are building a company culture that is a non-centralized, it's a decentralized circumstance. So as a result, like I've got to look for people that are wanting that. So I've had situations where people have found out that, hey, we bought the company, it's new, the last ownership is gone. And we've had old employees that were not there when I acquired the company come back knocking on the door, finding out that there's a new owner. And they're like so overjoyed about the fact that they get to see a new owner. Well, come to find out, like they need a ton of handholding. They need a ton of attention and they think it's a good thing. They're like, hey, yeah. I'll be the one to give you updates and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't want updates. I want you to just do your job. And I want you to talk to your supervisor. And that dynamic, they don't even want. They want the connection to the owner. So that's a big red flag for us, is like, if this person's saying, I've always worked directly with the owner, I know what it's like to communicate with the owner of the company, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't help. It's not a positive in the application process. What's actually better is, I know how to look at a very binary amount of work that I need to do, and I know how to effectively do that by myself. Like, that's a good measure, because we're creating a company culture like that, where you don't need to take a supervisor over 5. I can take a supervisor over 10, so I can leverage the quote unquote asset aspect of our business.
Right. I remember now that you're you're a big fan of quantifiable approaches, just overall. So in that vein, how are you measuring? I mean, this is kind of broad term, but measuring the success of any single person, whether individual or a collective or a team. How do you sort of go about saying, measuring efficiency, measuring success, effectiveness across the board?
Yeah. So in our world, we have kind of things that are on repeat, that are kind of predictable, measurable, in the sense that its amount of hours should make this particular widget, or all that kind of stuff, or this particular service should take this many hours. That's our world. But there are some variances where there's some customization aspect to that. And so what ends up happening is, at some point in the process, someone is accountable, because we have run economics on the profit capability of that particular sale or opportunity. So here's what I mean by that. So if we're manufacturing a machine, we've sold it to a customer for a certain price. Everybody knows that includes your raw materials, but then it includes all the other things that are aspect to that are costs of labor. And most people run costs of labor in these small businesses in the OpEx side of the P&L. Well, then you can't actually measure the success of that. But if I said, okay, we move this up in the profit and loss statement, literally in the QuickBooks account or what have you, and we say, okay, at this percentage, I can be profitable on the net profit side by running this kind of the process. What decisions would you make differently? And so we're quantifying, hey, this person is an asset. They're paid this much per hour. We should be able to get this much utilization from them. And we give them a little bit of feedback loop to be able to tell us, hey, we're not working, or we're over capacity wise. So the way that we do that is, we've got a system that says, here's your schedule for the week. Every single day you get to feedback that and say, hey, this is what was accomplished or not. And if they get assigned something different from the supervisor, they get a little bit of an out. Hopefully that's only happening 10% of the time or less, where they're getting a slight adjustment, where they can say, hey, this is not actually what I worked on today. So as a result, my measurable for the week was different. And you can know that. It's the same as if we had a machine. If you run it too hot for a long period of time, it's going to have issues. And so we want that feedback and give that autonomy. And then I can have the feedback to the supervisor side to say, hey, supervisor, you are assigning them, but then every day you're changing the circumstance for them. That's burning them. That actually takes cognitive load to be able to get them to switch gears every single day like you're doing. And so that allows them to have, again, that feedback loop of, okay, you're not actually performing what we consider the definition of a supervisor is.
I love the feedback loop. I think that in itself is can be categorized as a policy, right? Like, it's part of the employee engagement program, is this feedback loop. Because you could not have a feedback loop and you'd have no idea what's going on. And not to mention, the employees themselves basically wouldn't feel valued. When you don't have a feedback loop, I mean, in my world, in communications in general, I mean, even your own academic background, this, you're basically yelling out into a void when you don't have a feedback loop, right? Like, this notion, the whole nightmare of applying to jobs these days is exactly that. You like send out a resume into the nothing. And I once made I compared it to, which terrified the person I was talking to. I was like, it's like being in a black hole with no mirrors. Like, you just like, it's not even an echo chamber. You're just saying things and you get nothing there. You can't even see yourself. You can't see anything. and it gets scary. You start feeling crazy. And if you're in a
Yeah.
physical work environment with other people and you get no feedback, you feel even crazier because you're like, am I invisible? Can anyone even see me?
Well, the unique part of what we do is because everything is quantifiable and there's some sort of like number metric to it to some extent, it often creates a circumstance that the scoreboard is very evident,
mm,
right? Like that's the real challenge. And I say this with like full sensitivity. Most of the folks that we work with, played sports at some point or were involved in some sort of something, but they may have never been a professional athlete like Michael Phelps that everybody can Google his successes on there, right? So like their scoreboard was the timeline of it was very finite. And now I'm saying, hey, for the next 365 days, this is going to be a part of your scoreboard. It can be really stressful. And so we've learned that feedback loop had to happen so that they had a little bit of an out on their scoreboard, right? I played college tennis. My scores are still online, right? Like I have to live with that still today. And I have every explanation of like why that went well and didn't go well. They don't get any of that if we just create a one-way conversation, right? They don't get a chance to explain, hey, but hold on, this tool had this issue, or this part was late, or this didn't come to me at this time. Like they don't give any of that feedback, then their scoreboard works very it can be very objectively in such a way that it can be negatively impacting their psyche. And so that's what we had to learn over time, is that, a lot of folks putting their scoreboard on the wall can be a little bit stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally see that. So then this sort of ropes us back to sort of the umbrella of our conversation today, which is intrinsic motivation. So you would say, let me rephrase, would you say that this model, the scoreboard as well, and I believe the feedback loop is very, very valuable. But do you include any, again, this word is always tricky, incentives to instill intrinsic motivation? What kind of, like are team building things part of your processes, your policies? Are there rewards, intrinsic rewards, such as like growth ladders or, future at this company? Do you instill any of those kinds of policies, or let's say expectations?
Yeah, great question. Money is the lowest motivator. If there's any business owner out there or senior exec that does not know that answer yet, they will find it out shortly.
It's a 3-month high, and then you're like, shit, I'm still here.
It is the lowest motivator, but it is the easiest one from a senior leadership perspective to want to pull out, right? I'll never forget, my wife was working at a company and they had it was like her first job out of school, and he ended up putting cash on her table, on her desk or whatever, and I think we spent it within like 48 hours, right? Like it was like, it's such a low motivator. And so all that to be said, right? Like if you set that aside as like, hey, I'm going to do this differently, I'm not going to go for the low hanging fruit circumstance, right? I'm going to put it over there. If we're building an organization that is decentralized, it has accountability, it has measurable goals, all that kind of stuff, you have to then say, where is this person going? And I'm going to totally like steal this from somebody. I saw a clip the other day. I think he's the owner or the general manager of the like Savannah Bananas, I think is what they're called. They're like the funky, like all yellow wearing baseball team. That's like, I don't even know what league they're in, but whatever. And they've got these like skits they do in the field, and it's super cool. Right. And I was hearing his little skit, and like, we don't do this, so I want to preface it, and I might steal it from him in the future. But what they do during their hiring process is they ask for their current resume. They do a phone kind of cover letter or a video cover letter. And then they do a future resume, meaning like, where are you going to go from here now that you've kind of been in this, right? And there's a lot of things that probably go into that, like how many years you anticipate being there, you might put on there, all sorts of things, roles and responsibilities that might change. But what the exercise I think he's trying to accomplish there is you're setting here's where you could go, or here's where you envision yourself going based on the information you've received thus far, right? Because that's the real kicker, in my opinion. You can say in the interview process or through whatever means of information you get about that company or organization, you can kind of get an idea. This is where I'm going to go. In my world, buying businesses, a lot of investment bankers, they're coming through. They're like, I got 2 years, then I'm on to that, right? Like they would all put on there, I've got 2 years at this particular investment bank, then I'm moving on, or whatever it might be.
I love the future resume idea. That's so cool because what we do is similar. And I try to implement this even in my clients' programs, but for ourselves, for my company, we do it's the same way I would talk to a customer is, imagine it's 3 years from now. It's not a where do you want to be in 3 years? It's different. It's a go backwards. So imagine it's 3 years right now, we're having a beer or coffee and you're just ecstatic about where you are in life, like how everything's gone in the last 3 years. What's happened in the last 3 years to make you so happy? So suddenly they're imagining a future state and going backwards. So you're going down the ladder, as it were. And so now in the interview, we're already setting milestones and goals and objectives for their path in this role. So it's not even about this job today. This job today is how you're going to get started. But we just got you bought in because we were able to show you what your future would be like. It doesn't even necessarily mean you're still with us, and you talk about anything. You could talk about like, I own a lodge on, top of the Mount Sierras in California or whatever. Or like, I have 2 more kids or anything. It could be anything. And the more you talk about the quality of life and less about the work, the more the work starts to make sense. Because you're like, in order to achieve this, I need to do this, and so on and so on. And I think it does create intrinsic motivation. It puts you in a place of excitement and desire and like authentic care to get to that place because we're already there in our minds. We just got there. And now it's a question of manifesting that.
Yeah, I've had that's so good. I've had a few circumstances where people have said to me, I think this is, I think I've kind of done my time here, right? Like they're ready to move on. They either say that outright or they show it with their body language and their behavior, right? And they've said, hey, this is it for me, grateful for everything, but this is it. Or sometimes not grateful for everything. This is it. But it's really telling, right? And in that moment, I often ask myself, if I'm in that conversation and I get to hear it kind of firsthand, I often ask myself, like, was it that I didn't sell them on the vision of where we're trying to go, especially those that I wanted to retain and they've chosen to move on? Or is it a circumstance of, I wanted to be able to, see you prosper into something and I didn't give you a chance to, be a part of that vision as well. Or there's a combination of kind of inputs that causes that output. But, for me, I think it is a matter of, hey, we got to really create not hierarchy, but we got to create a pathway of like where this person goes here, right? Like what's the skill set that keeps them engaged? Because we do, like you said at the beginning, we do have a lot of team members and folks that are very task oriented roles. And if they don't get to be a part of that development and growth, it's hard. And so for us, sometimes that's introducing new technologies like laser welding. Sometimes that's doing circumstances where it's, hey, you're going to come with me and visit this vendor and they've never been on a plane before, right? Like there's all sorts of things and those are all true stories, right? And so that's the way we try to look at it is like, those are our kind of variables we can adjust.
Yeah, that's so cool. In that sense, you and I are similar because I try to give ownership basically to everybody in a capacity of, you're leading X, like whatever it is, you're leading it, like you're the lead on this thing. And those words alone, offer so much responsibility that it offers a sense of, authority over something. And that, it's a good feeling. And I'm very careful to be mindful of, do you want to have this much responsibility? Because I'm about to let you go. And if you go and it's all on you, like you're handling this, I'll back you up every step of the way. But if you don't want it, be very clear about that because, someone needs to handle this. So if it's not you, it'll be me or someone else or whatever.
Sure. We have a company policy that if you are in a management role, you must first check your communication, check the resources that you've provided that person, and then it's on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you have to understand, look yourself in the mirror. Hey, I did not communicate well.
Mm-hmm.
Next is I was not given resources, or I was not providing them the resources necessary. And sometimes that's the tools. Sometimes that's the information in some regards. But most of the time it's, I didn't give them something that they can kind of self-manage or self-regulate themselves with. And then the last is, it's on them, right? They've chosen not to adopt.
Yeah, absolutely. That speaks a lot to behavioral therapy, behavioral mindsets, because it's not a question of motivation. It's a question of ability at that point. Yep. You're like, we're all motivated here, but can I do the thing?
Yep. Yeah. I think the unique part about small business that I really, really love is the company culture that is established gets the opportunity to fit into that particular person's life structure.
Yeah.
So in one of our companies, like the hours are 6 to 3. Guys love it because they get to be the ones that pick their kids up at school.
Right.
It just fits into their structure. Right. Partly that was just like the hotness because we're in Texas. Like we adjusted that whenever the company was started years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's just the way we've thought about it, is that company culture has to fit for what you're looking for. And I think that's the Twitter example, in my opinion, in some regards, right? He created a culture that was high pressing, high intensity, all this kind of stuff with a smaller team. Mm-hmm. And there were certain people that wanted to be a part of that.
Yeah.
That's commerce. That's unique private business that you get to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I recently was humbled by another guest of mine, Chris Dyer. We were talking about like generational implications of how your age specifically might affect your, not just your abilities, but your motivation, what your motivations are, how you need to be engaged and so on. But he actually flipped it and said it's less about age and more about lifestyle. So, because you could be like in your 20s and have a family, and you could be in your 50s and have a family, or you could be in your 50s and be single, and you can be in your 20s and be single. And so from that perspective, you're the same profile. So like, you want community, you want to be with your coworkers, you want to be with your coworkers, you want to go somewhere so you don't have to be alone here, or if you have a family, you want to get the hell out of the house so you can focus on your work or something. Yeah. And like, if you think about it from that perspective, it actually makes it easier to address, because now it's an extrinsic thing you're talking about. We're not talking about your age, which is something else. It's something psychological and in your mind. But lifestyle is much more sort of practical to approach. So even when you're putting together programs for your employees and getting them engaged and bought in, it's a question of like, okay, if you're, a single dad and you have 2 kids and, you have to drop them off and pick them up and blah, 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 we can work around this kind of a schedule. If you're a single person who has all day to work and loves to work, then we can work around that. Yep. I thought that was really interesting.
I recently heard someone say they had an employee that unfortunately had some other issues, but they used to say, the employee used to say, I wish I could come in and work from 8 till 3 in the morning. That's what they wanted to do. That was like their schedule they wanted. And like, it didn't really quite fit the company culture because there was a little bit like more like see the person in the office kind of thing. But he was like, I would love to do it. I'll check in, I'll punch in or whatever I need to do. But he's like, that's what you want to do. And so you had to go find a different culture that fit that. But, everyone's got their thing and it's got to fit kind of life stage, like you said. And this guy wanted to be able to work at night and wanted to sleep in. So that was just what it was.
That's great. So, anyway. Listen, man, thank you so much for joining me today. It was honestly a pleasure talking to you. Like I said, I just love your no nonsense approach. Do you have anything you want to share with our audience? Leave us with any sort of advice on, not maintaining, but cultivating a culture that fits your needs, really.
Yeah. Candidly, I think that you get to be the driver of that ship, and there's going to be some explicit things that you do that creates that culture. And then there's going to be some, sub things that you do that creates that culture. And so, at our end, we're buying and running blue collar industrial businesses for decades to come. So we've got decisions around that. And we hire people to come in and run those businesses with us through our general vice president program. So for us, like our goal is to have people that have that kind of philosophy, where it's a people first approach. You're an observer first before you're just like, rules, let's go drive it. And that's the culture we're trying to create, where people can have kind of the hard skills of understanding how to implement and do things business wise, but also have the empathy and understanding of people and the dynamic that you're trying to create in and amongst a decentralized business. So the more you can understand and be self-aware about that, the better you'll be.
Amazing. Respect. Thank you so much, brother. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks again.